Christianity Today and other Christian ministries are calling Jay-Z's new controversial movie, The Book of Clarence, Christian in essence. Focus on the Family even said, "This film takes faith very seriously indeed, and one could almost even call this a Christian film, one with more explicit religious content than many movies churned out by the faith-based film industry." But there's a hidden message in this film that they're all missing, which makes the message of this movie quite literally not Christian and even blasphemous. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Now, as usual, there won't be any major spoilers in this review that you can't get from the trailer or the synopsis, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, this movie is set in 33 AD during the time of Jesus and his ministry, and the movie focuses on the down-on-his-luck, drug-dealing twin brother of the Apostle Thomas, named Clarence, who struggles to find a better life for his family while fighting to free himself of a large debt that he owes to the wrong people. So Clarence, captivated by the power and glory of the popular Messiah, Jesus and his apostles, he attempts to attain the same privilege and power by claiming to be the new Messiah and tricking the masses into believing him. But ultimately, along the way, he discovers that the redemptive power of belief may be his only way out. Now, on the surface, it makes sense why so many Christian ministries saw this movie as a Christian film. Initially, because it was produced by Jay-Z, many expected for it to be overtly blasphemous, but after watching it, they didn't seem to be able to articulate what exactly was wrong with it. Now, leaving aside the race element for a moment, in the film, the writers seem to treat a lot of the core elements of Christianity as true. Jesus is portrayed as a legit miracle worker, he's called God, and it's implied that he was raised from the dead. And by contrast, you have the protagonist, Clarence, an atheist, who's trying to con people out of money by doing fake miracles, and eventually, he comes to believe in the true miracles of Jesus as well. Now, though they stretch some of the biblical episodes in a way that deviates from the biblical text, overall, the film adapts these episodes of Jesus' ministry in a fairly accurate and non-mocking way. So it makes sense that so many Christian reviewers saw this movie as supporting the reality of Jesus and the importance of belief in him. The only problem is, they're all wrong. The underlying message at play has nothing to do with Jesus or the God of the Bible. Some viewers may be tipped off to this once they realize some of the liberties that the director takes. For example, the film draws from some non-biblical material to supply some of its narrative, like the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, which was written in the late 2nd century, over 100 years after Thomas had already been martyred. Now, at first glance, this might seem like simply a creative decision, but as you'll see later, there's a deeper reason for these references that everyone seemed to miss. And speaking of apostles, as we see in the trailer, the apostles are seen as this almost elitist group of people who wield power and influence and look down on the common people, which is what leads Clarence to envy them. But this is the exact opposite of the way that the apostles interacted with the society, as they were often attacked by the actual religious elites of their day, specifically for associating with the social outcast. But like most things in this movie, there's an intentional reason for why the director chose to portray them this way that has more to do with the hidden message of the film than faithfully representing the biblical narrative. But one message that they didn't try to hide were the pretty overt racial overtones surrounding a lot of messages around race dynamics that parallel a lot of the things going on in America today. They seem to really want to show a dichotomy between white and black people by having an almost all black cast, except for the evil and malicious Roman oppressors who were all white. They even parallel the Romans with stereotypes of racist police officers today. So those parts of the movie, I think a lot of people are going to see them as unnecessary and inflammatory. And although this part is overt in its message, it still plays into the hidden message as well, which we'll come to see here in just a second. But while we're in the realm of subliminal messages, as we see in the trailer, the depiction of how religion spreads and operates in some parts of the movie is also problematic. Early in the movie, we see religious believers depicted as ignorant pawns whose only function is to make the religious charlatans that trick them rich and powerful, which matches a lot of the modern stereotypes of how churches run and operate today. We even see the director himself say,
Clarence saw all the materialistic stuff, which a lot of these preachers around today see. A lot of preachers today see the Bible as opportunity, humongous amounts of wealth. So Clarence is in the town square with his best friend Elijah. He's walking, he sees Jesus coming in and everyone clamoring around him, and he's like, look, no one messes with them. Clarence is like, I want that now.
Yeah.
Right. So clearly, the notion that the church functions to gain power by duping the masses is one of the meta narratives in this movie. But those who watched it probably didn't know what to do with all of the references of everyone calling each other gods, that God is just like all other men, among other things that might make a theologically informed person raise an eyebrow. Now, there's a lot more that I can list to, from the perverse drug use in the film and the risque brothel scene, but all this is to say, this is definitely not a faith-based film. So obviously, if we're trying to apply a Christian framework to this movie, then we're going to end up with some big inconsistencies. And unfortunately, this has led some major Christian ministries like Focus on the Family and even Christianity Today to claim that the Book of Clarence is merely a mixed bag of a movie, ultimately still landing on such an unequivocal truth: Jesus is the real deal and he cares for you. And while not being the gospel, it has an undeniable fascination with the good news. Now, fortunately, these ministries, though well-intentioned, are missing the blasphemous worldview that informs the underlying message of the film. Now, you may be wondering, if these views are so radical, how could all of these Christian commentators miss them? Well, the reason why is because the qualms that they had with the movie were outweighed by what they thought was a deeper Christian message. But if we ask the director,
As Lakeith said, the film is not about Jesus at all.
Who exactly was Jesus in the film?
The Book of Clarence isn't the story of Jesus at all.
so even though some Christians are saying that this movie's message is about Jesus, the creator says that that is incorrect. But if Jesus isn't the focus of the film, then what is? Well, let's see what else he says.
There is a God in yourself. And that's super important, man. Like, there's a God in yourself, and that's like the most important thing. But whatever your belief is, even if you have no faith, God is inside you. And I want people to take that away from this movie.
Now, at first, this might not sound too crazy until we understand what he means when he says God. Because all throughout the interview, he frequently mentions not only that God is in him, but also that he is God, just like the other men in the room. Now, if you're confused, it's because these teachings come from a religion called the 5% Nation. And trust me, their beliefs get very bizarre and are all throughout the Book of Clarence, from the big themes even to the minor details. The 5% Nation is a black national religious movement that broke away from the Nation of Islam. The name comes from their belief, among other things, that among people, 10% are enlightened and know the truth and keep 85% of the world in darkness. They claim to be the 5% that's left that's dedicated to enlightening black people to give them truth and justice. Oh, and they also believe that white people are evil devils, that black men are a divine superior race that they call the gods of the earth, that God is black mankind, and a lot more. And these are the elements that are all throughout the movie, even down to the name of the film. If you're wondering why they chose the name Clarence, it's because Clarence 13X happens to be the name of the founder of the 5% Nation movement. This also makes sense of the fact why there's this continuous reference in the movie that knowledge is stronger than belief.
Knowledge is stronger than belief.
Unless the creator is a fan of Schoolhouse Rock,
It's great to learn, because knowledge is power.
then it's probably because knowledge is the top virtue in 5%'s teachings. Even more, Jay-Z, who produced the movie, is known for his 5% influence. And James Samuel, the director, repeatedly collaborates musically with 5% rappers as well. Even his greetings throughout his interviews are the standard 5%er phrase, peace to the gods, which we see variants of in this movie.
Peace, good.
Peace to the gods.
James Samuel.
My brother. Peace to the
Welcome.
gods. Peace to the gods.
So most importantly, we see how with this understanding, everything in the movie suddenly makes sense. But more alarming is the fact that these teachings aren't merely hidden in the tiny details of the film. Instead, they actually shape the entire narrative of the film and explain the unbiblical concepts as well. For example, when it comes to the movie's inclusion of the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, that makes perfect sense now since the story is found in the Quran, which influenced the 5% movement. Also, when it comes to the movie's handling of race, as disturbing as it is, it makes even more sense now given the fact that in the 5% theology, white people are intrinsically evil devils. And when it comes to the 5% belief that black people need to unite against the white people, this explains why that is precisely what happens in this story. It's the message that they were trying to get across. So obviously, all of this conflicts with the biblical teaching that there is no Jew, Greek, slave, nor free, but we're all one in Christ Jesus. It also conflicts with the Christian teaching that we're all sinners, whether black, white, or any race. So when it comes to faith, in the movie, Clarence starts out as an atheist skeptic agnostic, but eventually moves to faith and belief in God. But one key thing that Christians are missing is that his character experiences redemption and belief apart from Jesus. The reason why is because the 5% teaching is that God is black and all black men are gods. So if that's the case, then of course Jesus isn't needed for Clarence's path to salvation because he finds himself as a god as he became an enlightened black man, which by the way is the reason why we're seeing the constant theme of light bulbs in the movie representing enlightenment. So even though words like God and belief are mentioned in the movie, they're very different from what Christians mean by them. And lastly, this should also help us understand why the film depicts Jesus as black and what they mean when they claim that Jesus is God. In the Book of Clarence, the reason why Jesus is God isn't because he's the unique Son of God found in the Trinity. Instead, Jesus' divinity comes from the color of his skin, which is why the main character also finds himself able to do miracles after he becomes enlightened as well. So obviously, this is completely opposite of what Christianity teaches, which is why it's so important for us to understand the worldview of these movies and the media that we watch, because otherwise we might accidentally advance messages that run counter to the gospel of grace. Now, I could keep going on about the 5% nation symbolism found in the film, but the film should remind us of why the Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians 11:14 that even Satan masquerades as an angel of light. Just because something might look Christian on the surface doesn't mean that it is, and the most effective counterfeits are the ones that look the most similar to the original. And that same principle applies to this movie's message. On the surface, the Book of Clarence seems to be respectful to Christian teachings, but when examined, its message is clearly unbiblical and unloving. Unlike the message in the movie, white people aren't intrinsically more evil than black people. The truth is there's only one God who's morally perfect, and all people of every race sin and fall short of his perfection. In Christianity, black people are not gods who are God incarnate because there's only one God, and the only time that he took on human flesh was in the person of Jesus of Nazareth, who died for the sins of all men, black, white, and every other race. So when it comes to those who believe in the 5% theology, I'm sorry, but our salvation does not come from being black and gaining more knowledge or worshiping our inner deity or focusing on ourselves. Instead, it comes from recognizing that we're all in the same boat when it comes to our sin. And only by believing in the one who did what we couldn't, Jesus, we can find salvation due to his goodness and not our own. But now it's your turn. Have you seen the movie? Do you plan to go see it? Let me know what you think down below. But the next time that someone tells you that a movie about evil white people and black gods is a Christian film, what are you gonna say? What do you mean?